Hi, I'm Nadine. My pronouns are she and her. Currently a data analyst on the tech talent team, as well as the co-lead for YAPI, which is Yelp's Asian Pacific Islander ERG. The theme is Protect the Source, and as someone who has always been a history enthusiast, I have interpreted this to be historical source. In learning about history, I've come to understand the importance of tertiary, secondary, and primary sources. I would like to talk about my primary source for my history, which is my aunt. The side I want to talk about is the Fong family, my dad's side, which originates from a region of Guangdong province in southern China. The story starts at Angel Island in 2017. When I was working with the Yelp intern program. For people who don't know, Angel Island is an island in the San Francisco Bay that had an infamous immigration station in the 1900s for people coming into the US through the Pacific Ocean. Now, I had always assumed my ancestors were processed in Angel Island. So when I was there with the engineering interns, I immediately felt the sense of connection. Though the sun was shining and the temperature was comfortable, there was a heaviness in the air that I felt manifest in my shoulders. Looking into these windows, looking into the rooms, you see what looks like jail cells almost, and these marks on the walls, scratches, whether they were from fingernails, sticks, pens. You can just imagine people counting down the days of how long they've been trapped there, trying to reunite with their families or find a way into California. I remembered when my sister told me about a story when my aunt, normally a very bubbly and joyful person, went quiet during lunch when Angel Island was mentioned. I also remembered how my dad once told me that my grandma and aunt hardly talk about how they came to the US. I realized that my grandma and aunt were ages 30 and 13 respectively when they came to the States, and I couldn't help but feel distraught. What could my grandma and aunt have gone through? My aunt was only 13 at the time, and this is a time of crisis. Everyone is panicking. It is almost probably what feels like a lawless time, and I imagine most of the guards and even the immigrants themselves were men. As a young lady, honestly only a child, was my aunt sexually harassed? Was she assaulted? I didn't want to think further, but that heaviness I sensed felt justified as I imagined these things. Years passed without answers to these questions. I knew I had to figure out exactly what my story is. I needed to confirm with my primary source how exactly my family came to California. I needed to protect the integrity of my family history, but how was I supposed to do this without causing my aunt to potentially relive this trauma that even I felt when just visiting Angel Island as a tourist? I realized then that I needed to reconcile the two by having a courageous conversation with my aunt. I needed to ask some difficult questions, but I wasn't sure I was ready to have her relive these moments or even for me to find out the truth. I prepared myself for the possibility of getting to the root of what could even have been a source of generational trauma and hopped on a FaceTime call with her. In that call, everything changed. It turns out I was wrong about a lot of things. First and foremost, my paternal grandmother and my eldest aunt bypassed Angel Island. While it's true that they came to California on a boat, the boat they were on wasn't an immigration boat. It was a US Army ship that stopped at all the US bases across the Pacific Ocean to pick up the bodies of fallen soldiers to bring back home to the States. Why were my grandma and aunt on this ship that was primarily Army personnel and a couple other families that were already naturalized citizens of the US? Were they on this ship because my grandpa fought in World War II as a flying tiger? An Air Force unit that helped oppose the Japanese invasion of China? The answer I received was that my paternal grandmother and aunt were already naturalized citizens. While my paternal grandfather did indeed fight as a flying tiger during World War II, it wasn't because he volunteered in order to gain citizenship. He did so because he was drafted as a US citizen that was living in China at the time of the war. At this point in the conversation, I was even more confused. Why was my grandpa already a US citizen prior to the war? And how? I learned that my great-grandpa, so my paternal grandfather's father, was actually in San Francisco, California at the time of the 1906 earthquake. This earthquake destroyed much of San Francisco, including many buildings and a bunch of paperwork, thus destroying public birth documents. Because of this, the Chinese laborers who were in San Francisco, whether from the gold rush, building the Transcontinental Railroad, or general labor, could claim US citizenship. While I haven't verified why my great-grandfather was in California at this point in time, I do know that the earthquake is how he became a naturalized US citizen, and thus my grandpa and aunt as well. All this time, I had an assumed understanding on how my father's side of the family came to be in California, and by fear of causing my aunt and grandma to relive their trauma, I didn't find out the truth of my family history until very recently. This experience was a huge lesson to me that protecting the source means protecting the integrity of my family history. It is noteworthy to say that my primary source, in regards to historical sources, is a woman of Chinese descent. In a culture where it is predominantly patriarchal, this learning is poignant, especially as I reflect on my identity as a Chinese American woman living in Canada. Why do I feel so connected to Angel Island? I've now learned that my grandma and aunt completely bypassed it, but was my great-grandfather at Angel Island before he came to the US? At this point in time, I can't tell you. I don't know the answer. Why do I feel so connected? Is it simply because growing up in California, being Chinese American, I read this stuff in the history books and felt kinship with Chinese Americans throughout history? I'm really excited to continue learning and protecting my family history so that I can uncover these mysteries as well. If anyone is inspired about Asian American history, come join me. I have jump-started my own gold rush of sorts and would love to share in your journey as well. Maybe someday in the future, with all my nieces and nephews, or perhaps my own children and grandchildren, I can be their primary source as well. If I can be a primary source for the future generations of my family, so can you.